Hey, where's your suit?
I'm not wearing the suit, Frank, because it's lame and you look like a pussy.
Well, that defeats the whole purpose. I mean, the idea is to trick the moms into letting the kids bop with us.
It's not the 50s anymore, Frank. The kids aren't bopping anymore. They're banging each other and doing meth before they hit grade school.
Three Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy. Hello and welcome back to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where three friends challenge each other to broaden their cinematic horizons through a series of themed rounds. My name is Ben Lawhorn. I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm joined as always by Tyler Beck up in Portland, Oregon.
For those that like to bop, we salute you.
I like that. That's good.
I was very glad you didn't say something about bopping in your intro just now. It's like, that means I get to use
to
it.
Bop with us. Yeah.
That was my favorite part of the whole movie.
I should have said Bula Bula. We record this later. And also Matt Weiler's with us from Pleasant Grove.
Hey, ya.
For those new to the show, I'd like to welcome you to our movie club. What started out as a very long group text between us has turned into what you're listening to right now. Thank you for being here and listening. If you'd like to support us, you can go to our website, threefilmspod.com. From there, you can find the episode, whether you want to watch it on YouTube, listen to it wherever you want to listen to it. We have a Patreon, a merch, all that kind of stuff. So threefilmspod.com it's the one-stop shop for everything. Today's episode, we are continuing our movie music theme. Last week we did Purple Rain, as you can see by Tyler's background. And today we are doing the Buddy Holly story.
People on YouTube can't see that though.
Never mind.
Well,
only the lucky people here, only the lucky five of us can see it.
I feel so privileged.
Just do a quick cut in the edit on YouTube.
Just really quick, we'll show it, but it's just for the five of us. It's very exclusive.
Ben's not going to key Tyler out, so you can have it back.
I'm just going to have Prince the whole time on there.
I mean, with the backlighting on how my phone is right now, the Purple Rain might be a better option.
It could be a good choice.
I'll let you decide.
Yeah, those blacks are not very crisp at all. But today we are going to get into the Buddy Holly story. But before we do that, I want to introduce our guests. I'm very excited to have them on. Been waiting for a while, and I'm so stoked they're finally here. We have Bethanne and Leah from She Will Rock You podcast. Thank you guys for joining us so much.
Thanks for having us.
I'm honestly so excited to have you here. Like, we have guests on. I mean, we try to have guests on every single week. I love checking out podcasts and stuff, but I found you guys early on because you talked about doing like a review exchange, and I listened to one of your episodes. I think it was the Green Day one, and I was just like, nice. Oh, this is fucking awesome. I like this a lot. And so like I've just listened to it since then. Like, if there's an artist that you guys have covered that I love, I'm like, I got to check it out.
I just finished the No Doubt one, and it did not disappoint.
Yeah,
it's so good.
I did Motley Crue first, so I was like, how are they going to cover Motley Crue? Didn't disappoint.
Good choice.
I loved it very much.
And you know what this means, Matt, is that we can finally complete my Crushmore, because the fourth person on there was Gwen Stefani, and I had no idea how we were ever going to talk about her on a movie podcast. And here we are. So my Mount Crushmore is completely finished, so we can knock it out.
Let's go home.
So we're good to go now. We'll wrap up the episode here. Thanks for joining us, and that's all we need. But yeah, no, I listen to you guys on a regular basis. I love your pod. I think you guys are also just have a great presence, in the podcast community. So I'm super stoked to have you guys on. Do you want to let people know what your pod is all about and just where they can find you, anything like that? It's your time.
Yeah. First off, I just want to let you guys know that whenever I read your show title on Twitter or like in my podcast feed, I read it the way that Abed says 6 seasons in a movie.
Yes. I love it. That's so good.
Every time. And it makes me laugh every time.
6 seasons in a movie.
But we are She Will Rock You. We kind of have two separate show formats that have kind of evolved. Mm-hmm. So our main goal in podcasting is to we take turns telling each other the story of a band or artist. But we intersperse these interviews with just badass people in the music industry, mostly women. We had a few men on and off, but that's the show.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it started out, I think I heard you guys on another pod saying that it all kind of stemmed from one of your friends not knowing who Fleetwood Mac is or something like that, right? And
Yes.
then it's like, all right, here's what we do.
We had a coworker, Ben, at one point that didn't know who Neil Young was. Didn't even know, like, not that they weren't familiar with his songs, but had never even heard of Neil Young. I won't name them here, but we both worked with him at Spotlight. But anyways,
That's
it blew my
They know
mind.
who they are.
So yes, along those same lines, like, I don't understand how people don't know about some of these artists, like Fleetwood Mac, and I don't know. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you know, Leah and I, because we were coworkers for quite a bit before we started the podcast, and we were just going to go to this Fleetwood Mac cover band called Rumors, and we invited our friend Lauren, and she's like, who is Fleetwood Mac?
Oh,
And I was
geez.
like, and it just, not even like, we didn't even go into like the full on like defense mode of, are you serious? Why are you living under a rock? Me and Leah just like immediately looked at each other and were like, that's it.
This is it.
That's
That's
the
the thing.
podcast.
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
You guys
Wow.
killed it.
Pure inspiration. I love it.
I think Tyler would request one for me, which is one on Chris Christopherson, because I introduced him as the guy from A Star Is Born. He's like, that's how we're going to talk about Chris Christopherson. I was like, that's how I'm going to talk about him, because I don't know anything else about him.
I introduced him as the guy
I
from
mean,
Blade.
Yeah, he's the
To
guy
be
from
fair,
Blade.
that
There you
one's
go.
fair. Like, I could, you know, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, it made sense. I was just like, oh, I had no idea he even sang or anything like that. I just thought like, yeah, he's in that movie and he's in Blade. But
It's a good way to know him, though.
yeah, I think that works. It's how I will continue to know him, as the dude from Blade. But yeah, we are so excited to have you here. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about it later, but you guys have covered Buddy Holly on the show, which is kind of where this all stemmed from. I was like, I don't know who's ever going to want to come talk about the Buddy Holly story. And I don't even know if you guys wanted to, but you offered, you're like, yeah, we'll do it. I was like, all right, cool. Let's do it. Like, I think it's going to be super fun. Let's get into this movie.
Let's do it.
This was a movie.
It sure was.
You know, picture it. Lubbock, 1956. That's just for all my Golden Girl heads out there.
Picture it. Sicily, 1920.
This movie was something else. I'm just going to read the IMDb tagline, which says, the story of the life and career of the early rock and roll singer, from his meteoric rise to stardom to his marriage and untimely death, which is very succinct and accurate. That's what we got. We got like 3 years of his life in 2 hours. And it was, I don't know. I'm very excited to hear what everyone thought about this movie, because I picked it for a very specific reason that I'll get into in our next little segment. But, you know, we wanted to do music movies. I wanted to do something that I hadn't seen before. I had like Rocket Man in our doc for a very long time, because like, I want to see that. I haven't watched it yet. I love Elton John. Like, this
So
would be great.
good.
This was the follow-up to Bohemian Rhapsody, when everyone's like, he's going to win it for sure. And I still want to see it. I still have not, but I came across this and I was like, wait, Gary Busey is in this? He plays Buddy
You can
Holly.
bring us
Like,
back for Rocket Man.
Yes,
because I will
please
watch
do.
that any day.
let's do it. We'll
Yes.
do a Rocket Man Lebowski double feature. We'll go
Okay.
over
Yes.
it.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll pencil it in. I like this. Yeah, I don't know. This movie was just like, it was just, I don't know. I'm
didn't
going to say
like
my
it.
thoughts to all if you guys share yours. Yeah, Leah, what were your thoughts? Like,
Go
I'm
ahead,
assuming
Leah.
you hadn't seen it before. Was this your first watch, and what were your thoughts?
So interestingly, I had seen the stage show, but
Oh,
not
okay.
the movie. There's a small theater troupe here, and that's like their thing every summer is they'll choose like a biopic type story and do it. And so they did it a couple
Nice.
summers ago, and I loved the stage show. Like,
Mhm.
I knew Buddy was going to die in the end, and I still cried at the stage show. And then I was expecting basically that in a movie, and I did
Mhm.
not get that.
No, you did not.
get that.
No.
We did not get that at all.
I did not get that. I have
Oh,
reasons, which we'll get into as we go, but I did not. think that
this was not it. They set the
this-
bar pretty high. I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah.
Bethanne, what about you? Is this your first experience with this story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was my first experience. So here is how I knew about the Buddy Holly story.
Hmm.
it was when it was shown in 1978, they had like a premiere for it where Paul McCartney had an after party and Keith Moon was there. And then he died the next day.
That's right.
After
really?
like seeing this film.
I just listened to you tell that story on She Will Rock You, a podcast about music stories.
I forgot that was the event.
That was the event. And so for some reason in my head, though, I'm like, man, this must have been just a really good movie. I don't know why. It really has nothing to do with Keith Moon death. It's just the idea that there was an after party for with all these celebrities. I'm like, man, they must have were like sipping, drinks, talking about how they went to go see Buddy Holly in like, 1956, right? Because so many did. Like John Lennon and Paul McCartney went to go see Buddy Holly back in the day.
Yeah.
But like, then I saw it and I was like, this is it.
That's it.
This is what killed Keith Moon?
This is what killed Keith Moon?
Like, I kind of get it now. This is not great. I kind of understand. He's like, this
I
is
want to
it
do
for
some
me.
drugs now too.
He doesn't eat horse tranquilizers. This movie is a lot.
Yeah. So like, you kind of hit on the head. It's Gary Busey as Buddy Holly.
It's hard
there
to
you go.
deny it, Yeah, it was a lot. What about you, Matt?
I mean, I enjoyed it. I like seeing, that era contextualized and sort of like the role that Buddy played on rock and roll. However, I thought it was interesting that like they sort of glazed over sort of his inspirations and like what kind of got him to the sound that he brought to mainstream rock and roll, and like how provocative that type of rock and roll was, and also how like, black musical artists were doing it before he was. Like, I mean, we'll get into it in another segment, but I thought they brought it up vaguely, like the DJ hands off like Fats Domino to him, like, oh, here's stuff that you're into.
Hey, I got something for you here. Looky here. About time. Little Richard, Fats Domino, Big Joe Turner. Take them home with you. I can't play them. Thank you.
And it's like, you're like, oh, thanks. And then like they go to that the Apollo, and it's like him wowing the black audience. It's like, this is kind of misleading. Like this is
but apparently that really happened.
That did happen.
No, it's not a matter of whether it happened or not. It's just it was kind of backwards, because the white audience were the ones that needed to be kind of brought into that type of rock and roll. Like the black audience was already there. And so, yeah, like it's a white guy playing that type of music. But I mean, they had, Chuck Berry and Little Richard, before Buddy Holly came onto the scene. So he definitely brought in something unique. And so, give Buddy Holly credit where credit's due. But it was kind of interesting how they kind of glazed over parts of rock and roll history to kind of make him a little more important and, than he was, or than it seemed. But I was watching it, and I was watching like that roller skating scene, and I have always had a hard time relating to this era of rock and roll. Like I appreciate it, like the dance hall, like 50s era rock and roll, but I had to think about it through like the lens of my dad, who was born in 1955. So I tried to like visualize, okay, who's someone who was born, who's big a few years after I was born, and then died too soon, and like sort of changed the musical landscape. And he's our era's Kurt Cobain, essentially. Yeah. So it was cool to look at it through that lens. Like, okay, so this guy comes in, makes his mark, and abruptly leaves, essentially. But he's felt, his presence is felt throughout the rest of rock history. So it was cool to look at it that way. Yeah.
It's kind of, when you said that they kind of gloss over the fact that like rock and roll was stolen from black musicians, I don't know if I felt like was a huge part of the movie, and maybe I just misunderstood what you were saying, but I mean, I felt like that was the undercurrent throughout the entire
I mean they had
movie.
like the little blurbs there where they'd say like, oh, you're playing, black music, and he's like, oh yeah, but I don't feel like, I mean, it almost shows like the black artists, like they're like all cool with what's going on and all that. And I think like, obviously for that time, I think a lot of black artists, I mean, I don't know, I was never behind the scenes, so I don't like truly know, but like a lot of people were on their best behavior around white artists and white studios and all that, because like their career was riding on it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so whether Sam Cooke and him are really chummy, like who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the movie's depicting it as like they're, you know, buddy, like healthy competition. I don't know, but
Yeah.
Buddy's buddy.
You'd like to
Yeah.
think that there was like a general respect for like the artistry or the musicianship, you know, but you're right. Like, who knows if that's actually how it all went down. And we'll talk about how like the movie was pretty heavily editorialized by the Hawley estate. This was the first time I saw it as well. And just like you guys, like Busey just carries this thing without Busey and Buddy's music. Like this movie is, it's like a Lifetime movie, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like something on cable TV or something. It's just like that. I can see why Busey was nominated for this thing, especially with the fact that, like, you know, he performed everything, and that's actually him singing and playing and all that stuff. That's
Yeah.
really impressive, and he really pulls it off. You know, he really is Buddy Holly. You know, I've always had a soft spot for Busey because of Point Break. My boy Angelo Pappas.
Utah, give me 2.
Unabashedly one of my favorite movies. I guess mainly for ironic reasons. I recognize it's a silly movie, but I do love it. And so I've always wanted to see this movie because I'm like, how did this guy get nominated for an Academy Award? And I could see it, you know, like if it wasn't for him doing this and the music, you know, this movie is nothing. But because of those two things, I really had a good time watching it. So yeah,
it was easy to get lost in the Busey, I guess, of it all. You know,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he really is like carrying this thing. Like he was giving it his all. And I understood the nom after this. I'm like, yeah, this was a good performance by him. But like, I didn't remember anything about anybody else, you know, afterwards. I'm like, this was just like a Busey performance, and it was great. The reason that I picked it, you know, we talked about like I wanted to watch Rocket Man. I was kind of just going through music biopics to watch. Then I came across the fact that this is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which really blew my mind because I was like, I just don't associate Gary Busey with 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for anything. You know, it's like, it's just not, he's kind of become like a character of himself, you know, now. And I get that.
Sure.
But even at any point, it's like, wait, how is this like at 100? You know, it's like, it's 30 reviews. It's not a ton or anything like that, but still it's, you know, unblemished on Rotten Tomatoes. And yeah, I needed to see it. I needed to see what this was all about. My interest was like just peaked too high. But I'm kind of curious, I guess, like, I don't know. I didn't dislike the movie. Like it was good. It was fine. I don't know that it deserves 100%. I'm just kind of curious what your guys' thoughts were. Like if we were to rate it on a 1 to 10 scale, what would you guys give this? Like, do you think it was a bad movie? I know Tyler said it's like basically a Lifetime movie, but what did you guys think? Like, how would you rate this?
I think, you know, a lot of this is us looking at the movie in modern day lenses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when that movie came out in 1978, it was so much more well received because one of Gary Busey's performance, because he is playing all those instruments.
Yeah.
Fun fact, he's also a composer, which I learned.
Oh,
and
I did
that.
not know that, which is kind of cool. But yeah, like the music scenes in the movie, I know we'll talk more about it, but the music scenes are just great in the film.
Mhm.
Those were
Yeah.
definitely my favorite parts. But despite that, you know, that a lot of, you know, 1978, a lot of those artists that were out, Led Zeppelin,
Mhm.
Paul McCartney, Cream, Eric Clapton, all these guys looked up to Buddy Holly. And so I think a lot of the newspapers were just like, yeah, this is a great film
Mhm.
because of that era of music that was happening. And I think they had a different understanding than we do now because there's 60 years since he passed
Yeah.
since then.
Wow.
Like, you know, so for us now, knowing where music has gone, it doesn't hit like it did then. So with all that said, for me, if I was giving it the scale on Rotten Tomatoes, personally in today's concept, I would give it like 65,
Yeah.
70. Like it's fine, but like once again, we're losing a lot of probably the essence of how it would have hit back then.
Mhm.
I think I'd give the same score, but for different reasons.
Cool. I'm
Because
excited.
I feel like the thing it's missing the most is there's no personal connection that you get with Buddy Holly. He's
Yeah.
a dude doing things. And if you watch Rocket Man or Bohemian Rhapsody or Selena, like you get really attached to them personally because they show their personality. They show the things that they go through. And like there was literally no conflict in this movie other than the record label didn't want to sign him. Like that was it.
And like a little bit of band conflict sort of like shoehorned in there. Like,
but it all worked out in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it like got introduced 3/4 of the way through the movie. It's like there's nothing going on. They're like, oh, we just want to go home. It's like, what? You can't go home? Like, all right, I guess they're gonna break up now. I don't know. This is strange.
Like, well, they can't be. You can't call yourself the Crickets. That's fine. Okay, great.
We're okay.
Very strange. Yeah, I posted this little picture in our shared document when I didn't know this was rated 100% until you said so, and so it was a mix of that meme I dropped in the doc, the old woman saying what, or there's that GIF of a guy like blinking and like looking at the, I don't know. That's enough. That was like basically my two reactions. It's like, what? Like, because I don't know. For a lot of the same reasons Bethanne said, we look at it in a different lens now, but I mean that in a different way. Like, it's paced like a movie made in that time. It's shot like a movie made in that time. Like the camera doesn't move a lot. You know, it's a lot of like just one shots and still shots and like not a lot of editing. It's not very dynamic. It doesn't flow very well.
Everything is brown.
Everything is brown. Like,
brown. Yes.
Like it's poor. Like the B-roll they show of like cities to set up locations is like really grainy, probably very cheaply purchased B-roll footage. You know, like there's a lot of like technical issues that wouldn't happen nowadays, you know, back in my day or whatever.
The budget was like 1.2 million, which is like an indie movie now. Yeah. Like it's kind of crazy. It's not a lot of money.
I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to be too hard on it just because of the time it was made. And I know movies have gotten better and whatever, but at the same time, the 70s was sort of a golden age for cinema. So, I don't really know where to rate it. I would say just because Busey's so fun and the music's a lot of fun, like, 65% sounds about right. I think it's worth watching. I wasn't bored, but I was like, it's fine. It's just whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
For me, I don't know why it felt like watching All the President's Men, if that makes sense. Like, which is so weird. But like, if you look at that film, not a lot of cinematography, a means to an end. It's just telling this story. But that's like, I feel like a lot of the templates of 70s movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the story they told here, which is unfortunate, is that it was so boring. Because, I just listened to your podcast about Buddy Holly, and he's super interesting. And there was a lot of stuff I didn't know that you taught me in that podcast. And there's stuff that I did know. And I'm like, what? Like, why aren't we getting more of the actual story? And we'll talk about why later. But, they chose to tell a very vanilla story. And it's a very vanilla movie. I personally love vanilla ice cream. So, but it
shout
is
out
what
vanilla
it is,
fans out there.
Vanilla
and
bean
vanilla
all
ice
the way.
fans. Just kidding.
Mostly vanilla ice fans.
So the thing about a 100% rating is you're going to go in looking for things wrong with it. You can't help it.
Not
all movies can be Paddington 2, but I mean, for me, like I've already kind of gone through like some of my gripes with it. When I'm looking at a biopic, I'm looking for authenticity. And like even looking into this after, like I had my hunches, like some of that like cricket stuff was like a little, ham-fisted, like forced in. But the scene where the DJ's like blocking the door while he's playing the song,
it's like scene.
That didn't even happen. Like that happened with some other band, like the Four Seasons. Apparently, there's a story where a DJ does that, and so the fact that didn't really happen, like with the Buddy Holly song, is like, oh, okay, But so like looking at the 100% rating, I couldn't help but feel, and in addition to what I already said about this movie, like sort of like the Green Book of it all, where I mean. Here's a movie about a rock and roll star who brought a certain genre of rock and roll music to white audiences. And primarily, like the people probably giving their critique of this movie were white audiences. And so I think you're kind of getting that from that rating. from my perspective. Because I think of like probably Black musicians who were similar, like the Paul McCartneys, the Keith Moons, who were back in that era. I would be curious to hear what they say about the movie, because I'm sure it leaves out some influences and some things that they would have liked highlighted in the movie. But I guess that's my instincts on the 100% rating.
Yeah, I mean, presumably this happened after the big party, but Paul McCartney like bought the rights to all of Holly's music, and they did the real Buddy Holly story documentary after this because they didn't like what happened in the movie. And it makes sense. Like, it was an early biopic, like they didn't have all the tropes that we have now. Like, it felt weird in retrospect, like, oh, there was no montage about them becoming famous, like, which we get now all the time. They did do the thing where it's like off the cuff, we're going to write a song, but I didn't hate it this time because they didn't like complete the song, you know, when they're in the car, and I think they're doing Peggy Sue, right?
I really liked that because they left the original lyrics of Cindy Lou in it and didn't make it Peggy Sue. And I was like, I literally like said out loud about that. I was like, that's a nice touch.
And I agree. Oh, yeah, Matt.
Well, along with that trope, it's not like the car broke down. They're like, what should we call this? A car breaking down.
Oh, yeah.
My car, Cindy Lou, broke down. What are we going to do? I don't know. Let's write a song. We've talked about that before, like the Bohemian Rhapsody. He's like laying upside down and all of a sudden playing the intro. And I was like, that did not happen. This is ridiculous. But with this one, I was like, I get it. Like, you can like just like fuck around on a guitar for a while. Like, all right, this is the start of something and we'll flesh it out later. And that's
and even that song is like something you would come up with. I walk around my house singing songs all day. Like, I don't know how my girlfriend hasn't left me yet, but that's like something you'd come up with, just like, oh, Cindy Lou, Cindy Lou. Like, it's 100% a song you would just come up with off the cuff. It's a great song. But it's believable in the movie for sure.
That's what makes it so good. But yeah, I agree. I think this movie was just kind of like very episodic. It's like, here's the 4 things we want to talk about with Buddy Holly. But like you said, Leah, like there just wasn't any personal connection to anybody in the movie, even Buddy, which is just insane. You know, it's just like all of a sudden his band members like, we want to go home. It's like, what? Like, other than like a close up of like your drummer's face a couple times, we had no idea that he didn't want to be here. But he's just like, you know, sulking over in the corner, like everyone's having fun on stage without me. It's like, does this mean you want to leave? I don't know what's going on right now.
You can't understand the context of this one weird moment where Buddy was literally dragged back on stage. Like,
let's cut back to him 3 times.
You should have known how he's feeling.
I should have. It's been so long, you know, it's like, oh, I want to go home. He's having so much fun. But yeah, I don't know. This movie, I was surprised. I honestly was thinking the same thing. Like 65%, I think is, you know, it's like, it's not bad by any means, but it's not 100%. It's just kind of, I don't know. It's an interesting movie. I am going to jump ahead now because we're talking about this. One thing that we like to talk about on here is basically like what your elevator pitch would be for this movie, because we'll get asked, I'm sure you guys might as well, you know, about like, oh, who are you guys covering next? And like, we get asked like, what movie are you watching next? And it turns into like an elevator pitch. Like, oh, we're talking about this, and this is why we're talking about it, you know? Most famously, Tyler picking Ready Player One for our Spielberg round, which I had to explain to my dad why he picked it because he was not happy with that selection. I was like, no, this will be a great episode. It's gonna be really funny.
My favorite critic of this show is Neil Lahorn.
Shout out Leo.
It's my boy.
But I want to know from you guys, if you had to convince someone to watch this by watching one scene or moment in the movie, like for better or worse, what scene are you having somebody watch to be like, this is how the rest of the movie is, or you need to watch it just for this alone? Bethanne, I'm gonna throw it to you.
I think the last scene, because I mean, I love a good music moment in a movie.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like a musician biopic, like in Bohemian Rhapsody when they do Live Aid and they recreate every single step of it. That's incredible. So and good. It captures you. And I think the last scene definitely had those elements of it where it just pulls you in and makes you actually get a snapshot of what it is. Like, personally, I think if you don't include a lot of those, it's just a story at that point. Like, you don't really grasp that this was a real person and this was the real music and this is what it could have felt like at one of those concerts. So that would definitely be the scene I'd throw it to.
And you have the benefit with this movie of it's kind of like watching Titanic, right? Like, everyone knows what happens to Buddy Holly at the end of the movie. And so showing a performance from the end of the movie doesn't like spoil anything.
Right.
So like, And to truly enjoy this movie, I feel like, just like you were saying, you have to know the music. You have to be into the music to like this movie. So,
and I will say, after listening to your episode, I was really bummed that we got no reference to Waylon Jennings at all in this movie.
Yes.
So it's like, I thought, oh, they're definitely going to like right at the end, something like that.
They didn't really talk about the plane. Like,
no.
There was
I know it's kind of morbid,
The
but I was kind of
most
waiting for him to
I've
talk
ever
about
seen.
it.
Yeah.
Just like he's playing a song, it's like, and then he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I was expecting like a walk out to the plane, a
Right.
goodbye. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Freeze
an
frame.
An
Explanation.
even more sad ending to Casablanca. Like they're at the airport, and then it's like, and they all died. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. All right, it's like happened.
Cool.
Yeah, because other than the phone call, like we have no idea really that this is like the last show necessarily.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think they tried to tease it by like saying the bus was broken down, but that wasn't the case, right? They just wanted to get there a little bit earlier. Like they
No.
had chartered the plane.
So this tour is in the middle of winter in the middle of the country, and the bus that they used didn't have heat, and it would get so cold in the bus that like the drummer's hands were getting frostbitten every night.
Yeah.
And so I forget who it was. Hold on, I have it in my notes because I knew it was gonna come up. Richie Valens.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Richie Valens in a Big Bopper.
Mm-hmm.
And Waylon gave up his seat to
Oh,
Big
so
Bopper or
Buddy,
something?
I was trying to find who chartered the plane. Buddy
Yeah.
was just tired of being cold and wet all the time.
Yeah.
So he started chartering planes to get around. He charters this plane to go to Mason City, Iowa, and it's going to be himself, Waylon Jennings, and they had space for two others. One of the guys literally flipped a coin with Richie Valens for the seat, and Richie Valens won that seat. And then Waylon had to give up his seat to the Big Bopper because he had the flu at the time, and the tour bus was just really uncomfortable because he was a bigger guy and he was really sick, and he just was cold and nasty. So Waylon gave his seat up to the Big Bopper, and then I forget who the fourth person on the plane was. So they took off in the middle of a snowstorm, and the pilot was not certified to fly by instruments only. He was only certified to fly visually, and he should not have taken off.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Obviously.
Yeah. That's nuts.
But that's like such a good story. Like that adds impact to his death that they were like
For
literally
sure.
flipping coins with Waylon Jennings to
And
get on this plane.
It's such an insane sliding doors moment in our history, like in rock and roll history or like pop culture history, American history, like what could have been or what may have changed had he been around. Because like you talked about on the podcast, he influenced the Beatles. He influenced, I mean, pretty much
Literally
everyone.
their name.
Yeah, like everyone at some point was influenced by stuff that he had done or techniques he had developed. So had he been around, like who knows if the Beatles would be the Beatles? And who knows?
Well,
who knows?
the whole guitar, drum, and bass format was kind of brought by him. I think the movie La Bamba actually shows the coin toss between Richie Valens and whoever was going to go.
Nice.
And it's someone else who's famous. I cannot remember who it is, but I think something there at the end would have helped, been a little more interesting than just text.
Yeah, the freeze frame.
Yeah. Such an abrupt
record scratch. You're probably wondering how I got here.
In the stage show, it is a little bit more interesting.
Is
like,
it?
There's like a series of calls to Maria, and so just the one call at the end, and he's getting like progressively sadder. Another thing that they skipped over is right before he left New York that last time, he recorded just some like fiddling around on a tape player that's now known as the Apartment Tapes. It was like the last 12 songs that he wrote, and they were really depressing. They were like Peggy Sue got married, and just like he was going through something. And that adds another layer to it, like where there's theories that he owed like millions of dollars in royalties, or that he was involved in the mafia. Like the theories get very weird. But the songs are not like anything he had written. You can listen to recordings now, but in the stage show, he calls Maria multiple times, just like, I really feel like I need to come back to you. Like I shouldn't be on this tour. She was very early pregnant at the time. So then when the death hits, it hits a little harder because then you see her reaction to it.
We get a little bit of that before when they say goodbye. Like you find out she's pregnant and stuff, but They definitely
knowing, like, yeah, in real life, she used to go with him all the time. And like, this was the one time she did. And he was like, if I had been there, he wouldn't have taken the plane. Like, that's just all this survivor's guilt, you know, it's so gnarly.
Yeah.
And I think this also like set in place the contact the family before it gets to the news. Cause that's how his wife and mom found out, right? It was like on TV or something like that. Like, which is, I don't know. It's insane.
Trigger warning. It literally caused her miscarriage. The stress of finding out through national television that her husband had died in a plane crash.
And it's like, I know like we've hopefully come a long way, but
we have not.
Also, that just happened with Kobe Bryant, like how many years ago, you know, it's like, we got to get the story out first before his wife and children even find out, you know, it's just like, oh my God, you guys, like we have not, speaking of not coming far, just listening to your Moms and Papas episodes, like, yes, we have not really progressed in any way at all.
Well, that just triggered what I forgot I was going to say after talking about Matt with, you know, white people stealing the black man's music. Like, I literally came out halfway through this movie to talk to my girlfriend. And I was like, it's pretty fucking embarrassing to be a white person in America. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mean to turn this into like super political here, but it's like, man, we really like, we feel like we've come so far, and we have as a society and whatever, but it's just like, I don't know how to articulate it really, but it's just like, I can't believe that this is like our history and we're still dealing with the effects of all this bullshit. Just the racism and the oppression. And it's like, you know, I don't mean to get up on a soapbox here, but that's what I was thinking earlier, Matt. And it's just, you just reminded me, it's just like, we have come so far, obviously, because, you know, the difference now, the problems we're having now versus whether or not we should play rock and roll on the radio and why we shouldn't play it on the radio. But it's just, you know, it's all the same beast. And it's just like, it's part of the reason I like to watch movies like this, because there was some like troubling language, and the movie plays it off as being a negative thing when they say like, oh, you're playing, you know, quote, jungle music or whatever. Like it's played off as like a negative thing in the movie, but it's also a thing that existed and a sentiment that existed. And sometimes it's like, I hate to say it's nice to remember or to see where we've come from, but I guess in a sense it is nice to see like, okay, we have come far. We still have a long way to go. And that's why I think, you know, movies like this are important despite the 65% Rotten Tomatoes rating we might give it.
That's where I felt like the movie didn't go far enough, because
I don't think it went very far at all, but it was like,
because he broke into a genre that was very, you know, problematic for white audiences,
for sure.
But he had all the safety, you know, of who he was, like,
of course,
no risk really.
He was even safer than Elvis because he had this nerdy, like, good boy image. He's not like hip thrusting up on stage.
right.
Yeah. One thing I want to go back to what Tyler was saying, though, just like, you know, looking back at the history of it and seeing like, oh, we've come far, but we've also haven't come far. You know, this is why, to kind of put on my music history cap for a second, this is why history exists. Because even if it's not situational, like we wouldn't say certain phrases, or we wouldn't, you know, have a debate about whether rock music should be on the radio, there's still timeless, almost evergreen, you know, decisions and attitudes that still can be evaluated. And if we don't evaluate those and catch them, that they do have a way of just adapting to current standings. And I think, you know, it's important that we look at films like this and we look at it from historical eye, but we also, what what Matt was saying, look at it from a critical eye. You know, how is it, you know, holding up against, did it pay respect to the Black artists that came before us? You know, it's important to evaluate these things so that we can catch those and find ways to keep evolving ahead of that, keep finding ways to cut it off and to be better.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You know, we look at like all the problems we're having today with, you know, I'm not going to name the debates that people are having right now because we all know what they are and we don't need to get into that. But it's like, of course that these problems are a problem now, because look what used to be a problem then. Look how much we had to fight through just for like whether it's Buddy Holly being on the radio or Little Richard being on the radio, or whoever should or shouldn't have been on the radio. You know what I mean? It's just like we had to fight just to let kids dance in a roller rink. You know what I mean? Like, to bring it back around to Ben's question here before we completely side rail this thing. That's the scene I would show people to set this movie up, because I felt like that really sets up what this movie's about, because I did feel like they talked about how rock and roll was the devil and we can't make the kids dance and it's jungle music and all this terrible stuff. And I feel like that was like sort of the crux of the movie. It was what sort of drove Buddy. Like, he had this sound that he was going to get out despite the hurdles that he was facing, whether they were easier hurdles than, say, Little Richard or whoever, But yeah, and it perfectly set up like the music of the time, what was accepted and what was trying to be shown to audiences. And so I felt like that first scene, it perfectly set up the movie, and it gave me high hopes for the rest of the movie, and was sort of let down afterwards, because it was a really good start. I was like, oh, I know exactly what we're gonna get out of this thing.
Yeah.
So and it's non-spoilery. So if you're gonna show someone a scene, like, hey, you can check this out. It's not going to spoil anything. It's literally the first scene of the movie. So,
how about you, Matt? Did you give yours?
Like Bethanne, I think the best parts of this movie are the music parts. I really particularly liked the Words of Love scene where he asks the band to leave and does the overdubbing.
Yeah.
But I mean, with anything with this movie, if I were to try to convince someone to watch this movie, I'd have to start it with like, okay, look, it's Gary Busey. Hear me out.
Yeah.
Buddy Holly, like peak. I mean, this is the peak of his career. Like his acting didn't get better from here. I mean, there's some memorable roles that he has, obviously, but I feel like he peaked at this point. I mean, we watched him in The Last American Hero, where he's just that little brother. But this is as good as you're gonna get. This is, the Busification of everything. This is a Busey pageant, basically.
Busey pageant.
More than anything. And I think that would be the way I lead with it. And then you get some cool musical numbers attached to that.
Yeah.
Will you make us a sash that says Busey pageant winner 2021? So like a crown and stuff like that.
That's going to be an award. Yeah. The Busey pageant.
Good performance from a bad actor. I like that. Yeah. His like frenetic, insane energy really works well, especially for like the performance of the music.
Yeah.
Like he can really dial it up when he's on stage, for sure.
What about you, Leah?
I would pick the opening scene as well, because I love this transition from I'm being forced to play this country music that I really can't stand to I'm going to have fun and get yelled at for it.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to respond to the crowd here. I'm going to play for the people in front of me. Yeah. I think that's got to be the way to go. Like the scene I laughed the most at, whatever, was him just like breaking up with his girlfriend at the bus. Like, she's like 2 feet on the bus. Like, all right, also, I'm not going to visit you. Tell him bula bula, bye. It's like, wait, what just happened? This is like, it was so weird, but I loved it. That felt very Busey to me. But I think, if we're trying to set the tone for the movie, I think this movie did it with that opening scene in the roller rink.
Although your bula bula scene is more representative of the tone of this movie, because the whole time you're kind of thinking like, wait, what's happening? Like,
what just happened?
The band's in a fight now. Like, what? Like,
they're not together.
Yeah.